All right, all ready to start? I have Jeffrey Reyes for his quadruple boot computer presentation.
So everything worked beautifully, and I have a very smooth presentation for you with beautiful graphics. No. In fact, most things failed. I've been working on this for more than a year, and things just finally came together at 11 o'clock last night with a lot of help from a lot of people. But the point is that this would only have taken 4 hours if you add up all the time, if you knew what you were doing. I have no idea what I was doing all along. I do a lot of research, send emails, long cycle time. I've been working on this for a year, and so this is the result. I will tell you about the goal, the approach, the tools, the limitations, and the end result. The goal was to put 4 operating systems on hardware. I have some equipment that has to be on the metal, and I also want to establish a baseline for virtual machines in the future. And some of the hardware I have doesn't have enough memory, I think, for virtualization. So that's why I wanted to have these things on the metal. It seemed like a kind of a daunting task, and it turned out to be that way. Now, the OSs that I am putting on are Windows XP, because that's the last one that's compatible with a lot of hardware and software that I have. Although I might be able to use Windows 7. Maybe somebody can tell me about that. I think there's some compatibility mode or something like that. You can run some Windows XP things. And the later versions of Windows are very invasive, so I wanted to stay away from them also. I want to put the latest and greatest ECS on. I want to put Linux on because I need it for some things, for testing, and DOS because I have some software that will only run on DOS on the metal. I have a soft oscilloscope that I use, an ancient one. And so the result is will be a build that I can port repeatedly between machines. I'll make a drive, and using cloning tools, you can clone it to other drives, put them in other machines. And the reason is that the new hardware, some of it doesn't support ECS, and there are lots about the keyboard, so I like my old hardware, and I bought enough now. I've got about more than 10 ThinkPads to go EOL for me. I got my latest T43 for $10 at the MIT swap meet. Put a hard drive in it, worked instantly. I get T60s and T61s for $25. And so I've got five T60s and T61. I got a bunch of T43s. So anyway, that's my. So I can. This is the template install, which I can keep porting now. Okay, so now I learned something important when I started on this project, just methodologically. It might be useful, which is that the installs would fail and have to rebuild from the beginning. It was extremely time-consuming. So I realized you have to expect failures when you're trying to do something new and unusual. And so what I did this time was to clone everything. So I had to duplicate everything, and every time I did something successful, I cloned it. And then when I wrecked that install, I just got the clone out, and that saved a lot of time. Okay, so now, and I want to acknowledge the help from Louis, he's in the back there, and from Felix, who gave me a key insight here, and Jan, who's been a wonderful support via email. I'm sorry he's not here this year, but I couldn't have done this without them. There's a limitation which I'm using. The machine, the testbed machine, was a T60. So it might not work with other brands of machines, and it might not work with some of the newer ThinkPads, which maybe don't support OS2. I don't know, it's one of the things I'd be interested in hearing from you on. Okay, so the end product will be a refined analysis of how to do this, but that's not here today. I still have to document lots of things, and I hope that some discussion today will help me to perfect this. I learned some important things about limitations and constraints on the tools that we have, which may affect our possible ways forward here. Okay, so step one, define the tools. First of all, the hardware, 2 T60s, 260 gigabyte hard drives, a T43 to record the process, which is here, a camera because I couldn't do screen captures. And I'd be interested in hearing how to do screen captures before you've got an operating system loaded. That was one of the problems. Maybe there's no way. So you'll see some of the images look pretty crummy. And a T60 drive caddy. So that's the hardware that it took. And the software is the ECS installed this, Windows installed this, PC-DOS installed this, a Linux USB drive with an installable ISO on it, and I'll talk about that, and a DFC USB stick, which I got last year. It's just an absolutely wonderful tool. I made a copy of it, and you can put some other things on it too. Okay, so, and the nice thing about this is an OS agnostic partitioning and disk manipulation tool. Okay, so some things as we go along here. I'm going to bring up some images now. I hope we're going to bring up some images. And I'll just explain these images as I go along now. Okay, so the first one is something important about the, when you're using DFCs. How many people use DFC here? Almost everybody. I should have said how many people don't. Okay, so I'm basically an ignorant user, so I'm going to go over some things that were important for me. One thing is you have to be able to flip between the basic and the expert mode, and because some things you can't do, and it took me a while to figure that out. And so that is here, and then that opens up the possibility to select a partition. And there's another important thing about making logs. Okay, Jan gives excellent support via email, but you have to send him a log. And it's a little complicated to save the logs. What happens is when you do the log, okay, so it's saved in RAM. It's called dfswork.log. But so when you exit and you shut down the computer, you lose the log file. So what you have to do is you have to copy it to the drive to this one. Or else if you've got an operating system on the machine, you can copy it to the metal. So what I do is I just copy that over to, so there it's on Z, which is the RAM drive. That's where it's created. So I copied it to the hard drive, which was already there. I just rename it, 1031 log something. So you can either, but there's poor USB support for the FreeDOS, which this thing runs. So you either put it on this USB drive, which you can do, or if you got a hard drive partition that's working, you can copy it. There's that kind of hunt around for the drive letters. Just try to do a dir on various drive letters until you find what's there. Okay, so now is there a way to do a screen capture before you got an operating system loaded? Does anybody know that?
Cell phone.
Cell phone.
Well, I just use my Nikon camera, but there's lots of okay, so the answer is no. Okay, so then the next thing is the partitioning, how I did it. So I come up with 13 partitions, and I have a reason for that. So I have boot manager, which I put at the beginning, primary for DOS, a primary for Windows XP, and then a logical container, which has 5 data and program archives. I reach a little bit less than 2 gigabytes, just in case DOS had to access them or something like that. I divide them up, so it's D, E, F, G, and H. And then 3 partitions for ECS, and then 3 partitions for Linux, the root, the swap, and the home. So it's 13 partitions plus the boot manager. And I wanted the partitions to be mutually visible to the maximum extent possible, which is quite important for me. Because sometimes working in an operating system, I want to be able to go and do something on another partition.
Which boot manager did you use?
I use the IBM Boot Manager, which is in DFC. It allows you to install it, and I stuck it. It's sort of old and reliable, but Lewis says we may be moving away from that, and that's a discussion we can have today, because I made an interesting discovery. Okay, so now if we go to So here's what it looks like before I do anything. The disk 1 is the 160 gigabyte hard drive, and then disk 2 is actually the USB stick, and I overwrote it once. You got to be very careful about that. It took me. So then other things happen here as we go along. Okay, so here I'm going to do some partitioning, and I have a series of images here. I can show people if you want them later. Okay, yeah, okay, so there's that one. Okay, so I stuck with the default on the partitioning type. And put it on disk 1. So I made a bad mistake one time. I put it on the wrong drive, and I wrecked my disk, the USB disk. See if there's anything else exciting here. Okay, so this is a message, a mystery message that comes up, and I don't know the meaning of that. It says from this image file. I don't know what that means. Maybe somebody does. This is one of the things I have to clarify, but that's one of the obscure things that...
I believe you can image a partition into a file, and then you can, this must be the restore phase. You know, you can ask DFC to create a file which contains an image.
Right, but I
of
did
a
yes,
partition.
and there was no image. I don't know what it is.
Oh,
Maybe
you
that's...
would have had to have created that, right?
That's Boot Manager.
Yeah, it looks like boot
It is, yeah, that's the image of Boot Manager.
That's the image for movement. Okay, so that's, so how would you know that?
IBM.
IBM Manager.
The F1, help, that might be.
So, that's good. But now, you get another one here. Okay, so he says he did this. It was they created the partition successfully. And then we get well, there's a file that's supposed to be here, but it's not. So, okay, let me back up here.
So which OS did you load first?
Okay, so that's an important point. I talked to Jan about this. And it has to do with the Linux install. Linux, if it doesn't see anything else on the drive, on the whole drive, it will just take over the whole drive, at least the ones that I experimented with. So Jan said, be sure to install something else first. So I just put PC-DOS on. In fact, my PC-DOS CD failed, but I had my old floppies. So I was able to put enough on to, it sees the system file, so it says, okay, it's occupied. So then it says, what do you want to do? So I tried 3 different versions of Linux. 2 of them failed catastrophically. I had to rebuild the whole thing. Because even though they offered to install on the partitions I had set aside for Linux, they overwrote the master boot record. And that's something I want to tell you about. It's quite important and an interesting discovery.
There's a way to avoid that in Linux, I found out.
Well, okay, so you tell me that. Let's talk about it today, because that's important.
What Linux version are you using?
Well, I tried Ubuntu 14.04.
Disaster.
Yeah, disaster. I tried CentOS, because I was using CentOS for a IPPBX. That also was a disaster. But then Felix said, but for your project, there's one called Anti-Linux that you want to use. From some obscure place in Greece, the Anticapitalista website. And it worked beautifully. I'll show it to you. It even asks you where it wants to put grub. Only one I ever saw.
No, the Red Hat family, until I think recently, they had that option where it wasn't obvious, but it was in there that you could say, I don't want to put it on the master boot record, I want to put
But
it
you
in
see,
the
but these
partition.
other systems are getting more aggressive. Windows is getting more aggressive, Linux is getting more aggressive. Now, that's why I wanted to get a build that works, and then we'll figure out where to go from there.
Even the recent CentOS I did had a way to avoid the master boot clobber. But then you had to do some tricks to get it to.
Okay, so, I mean, if people know some tricks, then I'd like to know about that, because I'll build this in. But, I mean, it'd be nice if we could find a universal trick to force Grub to go on to its root partition. But so far, the out-of-the-box installers mostly don't let you do that anymore. And that was that's a big problem. That's a really big problem. Okay, so I ended up with the anti-Linux, which seems to be functional, but maybe it doesn't have some packages that I want, or doesn't I don't know. But these are the interesting things I discovered. Okay, so let me just show you what this thing looks like now. I found the file. Okay, so that's what it looks like. But you get some warnings, obscure warnings here. Obscure to me, anyway. Matched to multiple drive letters. And here, there's another one somewhere here, which says it doesn't start on the first, something doesn't start on the first sector. It works, but it might be a disaster. And so this is one of the things that has to be resolved. Okay, so this took about 40 minutes to partition it, if you knew what you were doing. If you're skilled with the tools, it takes 40 minutes. So basically the whole process, if you follow the cookbook, which I'm writing, the whole thing will take 4 hours of your life. For me, that's a good investment. But it's taken a year to get to the point to condense it to 4 hours. Okay, so if you're skilled, it might be, I'm sure Jan could do this in 15 minutes. He doesn't have to think about things. He just goes click, click, click. I've seen him, but for me it took, if you knew what you were doing, by the time I did it the fourth or fifth time, it took me 40 minutes. Okay, then, so then the first problem comes. So it's all partitioned. I put this back in, and I boot the machine. It boots, I set the T60 to boot to USB, and it says, I'll show you the picture. So DFC, the USB stick, says there are many formatting errors, and this process can run between 10 and 30 minutes. And I had it went once. It was an endless loop. It never ended. I had to shut down the machine. Every time you reboot the machine with this, it runs check disk for at least 10 minutes. And I asked Jan about it, and he said, that is a bug in the FreeDOS FAT32 driver, which is integrated in the kernel. It sometimes gets confused. It depends on which hardware you use. So this raises an interesting point. It would be better to do this, I think, and if somebody has the software, I'd like to borrow it today, to actually do this in a drive tray and have DFC running on an OS rather than FreeDOS, which is crippled. So if you had DFC running on ECS or DFC running on Windows or DFC running on Linux, which is the principal hard drive in the machine. Yes?
Why don't you use Jan's bootable USB stick?
That's it.
It has Linux on it.
No. It has Linux on it, and he says you just go to My Documents and you'll find DFC. I tried that. I thought it was wonderful. He suggested it, but it runs FreeDOS.
You've got to run his script that builds it up and copies things on. The actual Linux image you get from him has nothing except the Linux boot. And you've got a copy on the DFC image.
There are no instructions for that. There are no instructions for that.
Yes, there are.
Where?
On his site.
Where?
Also-
Where? We're talking about the search, yeah, it's very cheap, it's free, but the search time costs thousands of dollars for these
Wait a
things.
minute, DFS USB.txt, where all the other DFC USB, all the other DFC documents are.
He said in an email to me, you can run a Linux version from here, and you click, and sure enough, it says you just go to my documents, and I click through, and there it is, DFC. It runs free DOS, if you follow the instructions.
There's multiple ways, we can take it offline.
Yeah, well, this is something that has to be
Now,
fixed.
there are issues, okay.
Yeah.
The deal is there
Right,
are
so there's an
issues.
issue right there. That was the unexpected result.
Nice screenshot.
It's not a screenshot. It's with my Nikon camera. And it goes on, and on, and on, and on.
You don't have the video screenshot.
Okay. Okay, so then the next thing is you have to format the partitions. And so this is, again, outside my area of expertise. I made a lot of mistakes. But and there are issues, for example, the PC-DOS partition should be FAT16, but there's a particular kind for MS-DOS, and the WinXP partition should be another partition type. And then I use OE for all the data partitions, type 35 for ECS, and type 80 for Linux. And I've got some of these here I can yeah, and that takes about another 45 minutes. If you knew what you were doing, it would take another 45 minutes. And I'll
45 days.
So then when you get all done, that's what it looks like.
So you did all your partitioning using the DFC thing first, basically?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so you could do it with ECS if you wanted.
That's what I did.
Yeah,
done this.
but that's later, you know.
And I did this whole process just with ECS.
You can,
I made a couple mistakes, but it was possible a
Yeah.
couple of years ago. when I-
so I knew about that, and I still have to do some things. I still have to do some LVM stuff, I think, with ECS. But my thought is, let's develop a process which uses a single tool for everything.
Right.
Rather than, Linux will do this and ECS will do that, and, just one tool, it's kind of a uniformity about it.
Right.
And to speed things up, it's better to have because, okay, so you want to do it in ECS, you got to read the manuals, right, unless you're skilled at it. And for a person who knows nothing, this is how to do it. This is the, okay, so, and then, okay, so that's what the partitions look like when you get all done. Okay, so some comments about DFC. This is a wonderful labor of love that I hope he's making lots of money on this thing because it's such a wonderful thing, but there's a couple of big problems with it. One is he doesn't know everything it does, or doesn't do, and he finds out, it's like, Microsoft, they're basically putting beta versions out for the customers to test. He finds out when people like me report, unexpected result. Runs. He still don't know. I got another message from him this morning. They're still thinking about this thing.
I mean, I've had it wreck things also, so that tool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So some points about the documentation. It's inaccessible. I mean, it's on his website, but how there's so much. It's scattered, it's incomplete, some things are inaccurate, and the performance bugs are not documented. And so that's an important thing, to prepare proper documentation for this wonderful tool. And that's something that should be done. Okay, so anyway, after I formatted everything, again, ran 30 minutes on running check disk again, and then I started populating with the operating systems. And so the first warning is Linux has to see another operating system or it will seize the whole disk. And that's something I learned the hard way. And the second thing is, okay, so now this was an interesting discovery. Jan, I said, Jan, I'm going to try this again. I've been working on this for a year. I want to put Linux. He said, oh, very difficult. He said, you must avoid a distribution using grub2 because it will want to put the grub into the master boot record. And so I said, well, where do I find a distribution which doesn't use grub2? He says, well, I don't know. I don't know much about Linux. And so I went to ask.com, Linux distribution, grub1. No answers. It's all, I mean, it's just a mush out there. There's no repository of this information that I could find.
The problem with that is that not only that you have to fix the master boot record, but it's not in the Linux partition. That's the other issue.
Okay. So I'm going to go through it. It's quite interesting what happened. So anyway, this is the expert. He said you can't use grub2. Find a grub1. So I failed, but I had some ISOs for different Linuxes, so I put them on. So first I installed IBM PC DOS, and that went fine. Okay, so now the secret about this, and this is another important distinction. If you're going to install Windows or you're going to install DOS, and I think ECS, you set the target partition active using DFC. You can do that with DFC. And then when you put the install medium into the machine, that's all it sees. You hide the other partitions, and one is active. But Linux is different. It doesn't look at the active flag. And that's the problem. But there turns out to be a solution, which I stumbled upon due to Felix. Okay, so anyway, I used DFC to set the DOS primary partition active. I put my floppy disks in my floppy USB drive, and it went right in. Perfect. Didn't even know any other partitions were there. It worked. And then so I didn't install Windows. I figured, okay, I can do that now. I didn't install Windows. The partition is there, shows up in Boot Manager, but if you open it, it just says no operating system found. Okay, so I thought, we'll do Linux. That's the big challenge, which I failed on for a year. So the first thing you have to do is you get an ISO, and there are lots of places, although I think it's getting hard to get 32-bit images now. You can sort of find these things, but there are lots of troubles, and they're very big. I had to do it 4 times last night to download the anti-Linux. It took hours and hours and hours. But anyway, once you get it on your disk, you just get a little tool, a little software tool, and there are lots of these. One's called Rufus. I use one called Universal. And I'd be interested in knowing is there an ECS tool for creating a installable ISO image? Does anybody know?
For creating an installable ISO image?
Yes.
If you go to the Arkanoe store,
We can buy it.
you can purchase DVD toys which will create bootable ISOs.
Okay. So that's interesting to know. Maybe you send me a message about I want to put that in here. And I assume there's a tool for Linux too. I use Windows tools. So just because they
There are a number of tools for Linux. The question is, how user-friendly would you like it?
Yeah. Okay. So the one, well, the one for Windows.
How long a command line would you like? in
No,
order
no.
to create a bootable ISO?
Go ahead. The one for Windows is wonderful, but there's a trick about it, and I lost hours on this thing too. So it's a little tiny utility. You download it for free called Universal something or other, Universal Installer, and you just open it. And one data input window says, what distro do you want to use? And it's got like 100 different things which it'll capture from the internet. And I said, yeah, but I had downloaded my distribution. What do I do? So I finally figured out, or somebody told me, if you go to the very bottom line, it says other distribution. And if you click other distribution, it looks on your hard drive. Yeah, that took hours to figure out. I got stuck on that. Okay, so I create you get the ISO after many hours of trying to download them. You put it on a USB stick with one of these installers, and then you put it in and you boot the machine. And so I tried Ubuntu 14.04, and it overwrote the master boot record, even though everything is hidden. And so that was a big problem. But Jan was there for me. He said, oh, you just go to a function in DFC called fix MBR, and it just overwrites the master boot record. You lose Linux, but you get boot manager back. And that really changed my life when I knew how. I've been reading about it. Oh my God, I don't have to keep rebuilding the whole drive. I just fixed the master boot record. Okay, I even went to the Wikipedia and got the long article on MBR, and I'm reading it now. So I want to actually go through and look at the bytes and see them now. Okay, so then I thought, okay, but I've got CentOS because I was setting up an IPPBX, and the same thing happened. It overwrote the master boot record.
See, now that one you can intervene in CentOS.
No, it doesn't. Where?
In the place where you do partitioning, there's an option in there to.
It says where do you want it?
Yeah,
Where do you
so
want the
put it
code?
in- You put it in the Linux boot partition.
Grub it puts in the master boot
Okay,
record.
maybe, I mean,
Yeah.
I haven't done this for a couple of years.
This
so-
is the thing that I discovered. Ubuntu doesn't even ask.
I know that.
Yeah. CentOS asks where do you want the code, but it doesn't ask you where you want grub. Okay. So then I had to do, but then I knew the fix MBR trick. Took 2 minutes to fix that problem. Saved hours. Yeah, so this is what Jan says. Yeah, it's quite common with Linux installs. You have to be extremely careful and know what the install will do. And you can't always avoid damage due to the aggressive nature of Linux tools. This is the problem. You know, the software is getting more and more ill-behaved now that we're getting into this wonderful new world. Says the best way is to make sure you have a distribution that allows you to select where the bootloader goes. For simple, easy installs, it will go into the MBR, hence destroying IBM Boot Manager. So he says you should choose Grub 1 over Grub 2. Grub 2 install is even more aggressive. Okay, so fortunately, we have this wonderful correspondent, Felix Mayata, who's only a few hours from here. I'm sorry he isn't here today. He said, oh yes, the one that will work for you for your Warpstock presentation is anti-Linux. And he gave me the link. And I say it's some anti-capitalista website in Greece, and there's lots of political propaganda, but it installed, and here's what happens. And this was a happy discovery in my life. So, and this is what you should be looking for. If you don't, no, basically, if you don't see this screen, stop.
Check it out.
Okay,
Need to
so
check it out.
what's happening here? Why have we?
Yeah.
You were eco-blanked.
We're saving electrons.
Exactly.
We're saving photons. I think that's a wonderful idea. So there it is. Okay, it says, where do you want to put the code for boot and swap, root and swap and boot, and then, it should be home, and then look at that. Install Grub on master boot record or on root. If you don't see that screen, destroy that ISO. Okay, so we had to go to Greece to get that.
I know some of the older versions of Ubuntu used to ask you where you want to put it.
Yeah.
Around 10 or 11 or something like that.
Okay, but I don't even know where you get those anymore. And if you get, was working on one of them, and
Yeah.
there's some upgrade path, and I don't know, it wouldn't upgrade. It said you have to go and install a different ISO to do the upgrades because they fork. And so it's like Windows, you know. It used to be manageable. I mean, from Windows 3.1, you could have the text file. What is now the registry was a text file, easy to read. Now it's very complicated, and they install all over the place. So that's why I want to do things in the simplest possible way.
Well, there used to be a boot manager for Linux called Lilo, and I understand
Oh,
that's
yeah.
been worked up and is becoming, they've been working on it. I don't know how you could substitute the Lilo for the Grub without getting all kind of problems.
These are
That's your
things-
next year of your life, is to figure out.
Not for me. I'm writing a book on something else. I gotta get this working so I can start on
Lilo
the,
does not interfere in the manner that Grub does, so far as I know.
Yeah,
But
okay,
I'm
so-
not sure.
so these are issues Lewis is probably gonna be thinking about in terms of the migration that we're all
Yes,
gonna be.
yes, I'm sure
for.
it is.
You know, my idea, I just never got on the forced march Windows,
You're gonna
I
do
just
this on-
stopped
I
at.
don't blame you.
Okay, so anyway, this works. And
Thoughts about bootloaders?
Grub 3.
yeah, okay. So anyway, it works very well, and so the things that remain for me to do now are to install ECS, which I will do after dinner tonight. And if anybody would like to come and hold my hand as I do that, that would be very nice. Yeah, it's basically, I will hide the other partitions and make, so I make that logical partition active. I've never
No,
installed.
You can just boot ECS install and put it in the place you want it.
It'll ask you then,
Generally. Yeah,
like
no, it's
this.
not.
It's a well-behaved install.
Right.
Okay, so anyway, that's my adventure at 7 o'clock tonight. And I will install Windows tonight.
You need to get a Greek ECS.
Okay, so then other things tonight now that I have to think about are the matter of the visibility between operating systems. And so that's partly installing LVM and other things. So if somebody's an expert on that, come and help me, and then I will put that into the final presentation, how to do that. And then there's something else here, which is how to tweak Windows and how to tweak Linux for the ThinkPads. So for example, in Windows, there is a ThinkPad configuration. You can download it. Well, it comes with OEM Windows from IBM in the old days. You'd get ThinkPad configuration in system. But if you buy a Windows install disk and put it in, you have to go and download it from someplace. And these things are getting kind of confused. You know, it's been sold to Lenovo. And I've got Linux running on a $25 T60 I got from MIT, but it doesn't have the ThinkPad configuration. But in fact, there is a ThinkPad configuration for Linux. You know, it's a ThinkPad icon, and so these are the things I have to do to customize it for the hardware. Okay, so here's some conclusions now, and then we can have a discussion. I think you have to use. Okay, so the interesting thing about anti-Linux is it is Grub 2. So even though Jan, the expert, said, don't use Grub 2 because it's so aggressive. In fact, if the install is coded properly, Grub 2 works. So that was an interesting discovery for me. So it's possible. You don't have to exclude distros that are Grub 2 loader, but we have to figure out how to force them to ask you where to put the code. Whether we have to find distros that do it, or whether there's a way, if you build it, to build it a module in to force it to ask where to put the put Grub. So another limitation is that Windows is getting to be sort of more and more aggressive. I think the last one I will go with is Windows 7 maybe, and maybe somebody knows. I recall reading some functionality that Windows 7 has some compatibility module or something, and it'll load Windows XP programs and Windows XP drivers.
I think it's a VM that does it. There's an XP VM thing.
Okay, that's next year. Okay, some other issues. What do we need so that DOS can see NTFS and JFS partitions? I think there are drivers for that. So I don't know. Process to install LVM to stabilize the drive letters. Eventually, I'm going to convert this hard drive to a solid-state drive. And I don't know whether there are any particularities about that, too, but my wife was complaining about how slow her computer was. So in Bangkok, I took it down to a shop, and for $200, he installed a solid-state drive. My wife is so happy now. Life is so beautiful. You just turn it on, and there it is. So,
they're under $100 now, no problem.
right. Are there any?
Really cheap, and you can get an adapter that plugs into USB and it plugs into the SATA port, and software just clones it right over.
Well, I've got the drive
T43 is
caddy.
PATA. That's T43 is.
Oh, PATA, well, then you gotta get a PATA, and then you just have to have an adapter cable that goes to PATA to a big PATA and do it on a, you know.
Yeah. So these are some things I want to document, because I want to
What
go
I've
to.
used is there are pieces of hardware that have a USB connector and they have 2 drive slots in them.
Yeah.
Then you don't have to worry about is it running, not running, or anything. That's an easy way to.
Well, I'm hoping my drive tray will let me do that. I invested $15 on eBay in a drive tray.
No, you could have gone 20 and got the other thing.
Get that too. I mean, one of the interesting lessons from this was have the right hardware. I brought it all in a trunk from Boston. I got 5 computers here and a printer and drive trays and everything. Okay, and then where to source the Windows and Linux ThinkPad specific drivers. I think that's an important issue. And then this problem about DFC, this check disk thing. That's just sort of an unexplained abnormality, and that's taken maybe a day of my life. Every time I do something, I have to wait between 10 and 30 minutes for it to complete its check disk functionality, which Jan doesn't, he just says is some bug in FreeDOS. So whether that's true or not, I don't know, because other things he's told me, mostly they're right, but some things he's not sure about. And an important thing, if somebody's got DFC running on an OS in a drive that'll fit in a T60 tonight, I'd like to try this. I'll just put it in and put one of these testbed drives in the caddy and see when it looks at it, does it also run the check disk, or is it really something in FreeDOS in the little tiny thumb drive here?
I do have one question, is why you weren't using AirBoot instead?
So it's a complication. IBM boot manager is well documented. I don't know anything about AirBoot. It would have been another day or two to research that, and it might have failed. I'd have to keep rebuilding the thing.
I mean, it's not in the boot manager area, so it starts up and lets you control things after, something is screwed up.
Yeah. So I've heard about it. There are other boot managers. So, but does it have to be in a primary partition?
No.
No.
Doesn't
No.
take a partition.
It only uses one address in the MBR, and then it loads it, AirBoot into memory, and then you have choices to control.
Okay. So what happens to Linux? If suppose AirBoot is installed and you install Linux, what happens?
If it's installed correctly, you can boot to Linux directly. But the grub has to be in that same partition. Where the
As
Linux-
The Linux
AirBoot.
partition.
Where the Linux is.
Yeah.
Grub has to be in Linux group.
Yeah, but they don't all let you do that, as I discovered twice.
Yeah. No, same limitations.
Same limitations. Okay. So what does AirBoot get me? I get a primary partition back then.
Yeah.
Is that it?
You get primary partition back, it has a lot of flexibility of things that it can do. When you start up, you can make it hide things from other, it has automatic correction for Windows 2 different types of partition types that it switches back and forth between to confuse the world. Depending on how big they are, it will automatically switch these things for you. Oh, you're gonna boot that, okay, it wants to see this, boom, there it is.
Okay. So this is interesting, but it's only interesting in the sense that this is another very complicated adventure. You have to read a manual, you have to download us, you have to print out things, you have to read them. Lots of things can go wrong. IBM Boot Manager is very simple. It takes a primary partition, so that's a limitation, but it works for me. I might think about that someday. Okay, so now...
Another one possibility is you could use grub to control the whole thing.
So...
I've done that before, because of Ubuntu.
Yeah, well, so when Ubuntu took over the machine, it saw Windows and said you can run Windows. And I clicked it and it loaded Windows.
Yeah.
But I don't know where the documentation is. I don't know about the bugs in that. This is another adventure, many days.
It's all on the internet.
Yeah, come on. It's free, but the search time
But
is
I did
expensive.
find out how to do it, and you basically rerun the grub install or something, and it'll go out and find everything for you and add it to the list it has. And
So you have to be skilled in Linux to get the grub installer to run.
Not that skilled, but.
Well, I'm near zero, epsilon. So, well, would you send me some information? I'd like
Yeah,
to do
I
some
can
research
try to
on
dig
it.
it up.
Yeah.
But I had one Linux on, and I put Ubuntu on, and then I couldn't get to the other Linux, so that's when I figured this out.
Okay, send me a link. Okay, and one other thing I don't know the answer to, but it's interesting to me because I'm interested in virtualization. Would this install allow me to, running Linux, allow me to virtualize ECS. Because they're both on logical partitions.
Allow you to virtualize ECS.
Using the code on the ECS partition.
That's power virtualization. And there are some virtualization solutions which will allow you to do that, including recent versions of VirtualBox, which will allow you to boot virtually an existing partition on the physical drive.
Yeah, okay, that's the question.
It
right.
should work.
Yeah.
I don't know whether OS2 is a supported guest OS for power virtualization.
Mhm. Yep.
I mean, we may need
Plus Mike.
NetIO, you think? Sorry, I caught you thinking about something else.
Caught somebody asleep back there?
Also, doesn't your OS2 has to be set up to use the limited set of hardware available in the virtual machine also?
Well,
Aren't you gonna have problems with that as well?
You would need, well, what you would do is you would need to install. You really can't install based on your physical hardware.
Right,
And then
right.
access that. What you need to do is you need to run VirtualBox and you need to do a clean install of OS2 into a partition on the drive instead of a virtual container. And then that will set it up for the hardware in
Gotcha,
that virtual
right, okay,
machine.
yeah.
I don't know that OS2 is a supported guest because I believe that there is a requirement for the guest editions to support the power virtualization in order to talk to the hypervisor to access the hardware. But for other operating systems, some other operating systems, that is possible. The advantage to power virtualization is that when the hypervisor isn't running, when VirtualBox isn't running, you can access the files in that partition if you can read the partition.
Right, so this is my issue about the mutual visibility. Okay, so that's what I had, and I hope this has helped somebody. I've gotten some good answers from you. I appreciate it very
A
much.
shortcut on that thing with the sharing stuff is just to set aside a partition that's, I guess, FAT32 is the one that everybody can read.
Right.
And then you can copy into it and out of it.
Yeah,
So
my
I know
drives,
it's not as
D, E, F,
good
G,
as
and H are all
direct access.
FAT32.
Oh,
Right, yeah, they're all FAT32.
The other thing, of course,
So you
is
should
is
be
that
able
if
to-
you've got CommStation and it's JFS, then Windows is going to say, would you like to access that? And it will proceed to format it so it can access it.
You just-
So you have to tell it, when you go in there into the system commands, whatever, you have to tell it, no, get rid of the drive letter for that one.
Mhm.
Okay, anything that you don't want it to make accessible, that is a disk format that it doesn't know,
Mhm.
okay, then you gotta do that.
So I
Otherwise,
assume,
it'll pop up every time you decide to.
Just remove those
mention
drive
that.
letters,
It'll
yeah.
say, I can't access that, would you like to make it accessible?
Right.
And it will. It'll format it quite nicely.
ECS is now installing, no longer HPFS now, so IFS now?
All right, you mean JFS?
JFS now.
ECS doesn't install anything anymore, as far as I know. The last version of ECS was 2.2 beta 2, so.
Yeah, you can still install it on HPFS.
JFS or HPFS, either one. It'll install.
So what file system does it use now, or the current?
Bootable JFS
Yeah.
is the standard OS2 bootable file system.
Since which version?
Well, Arca OS 5.
So basically what you're selling is,
What other version of OS2 is there? Is there another version of OS2 that's being currently developed?
not that I know.
Then
No,
there you go.
but the point is that if you happen to have a copy, which most of us do at this point, of ECS, okay, it is going to be your choice, bootable JFS or HPFS. Neither one of which is going to be accessible by Windows, even though it will get confused because it's the same partition type as NTFS or
Type 7.
HPFS.
Theoretically, you can read an HPFS partition under Windows, the pinball.sys driver
yes.
should work, I think, up through Windows 7, doesn't it?
Something like
Sys
that,
driver work?
Yeah, right, I've done that before.
But the reason I partitioned this way, none of my data is on the OS2 partitions. Only the executable stuff, so which I would never want to access from another OS.
Well, then you just have to tell it, don't access it.
Yeah, so I'm not worried about
You have to
that.
hide it. Oh, no, you have, but you have to do it. You can't
That's
just,
a Windows thing, that's, you know.
that's a Windows thing. You gotta go in Windows and tell those. do not
That's the
access.
latest, remember, I'm working with primitive Windows XP here, so it won't,
You can hide it there too. It'll do the same thing to you.
They have it in a different place in the menus, it's, you know, there's no difference between 10 and XP, except where they put everything.
okay. Any other hot questions here?
I mean, it's sort of big picture. You have a lot of laptops. And another choice you might have made was one operating system on each of the laptops and network them together.
No, I carry them around.
But you carry them around.
Yeah, I
It's easier
travel
to carry
around.
one.
Yeah,
Yes.
and, okay, so this is an important point.
Yeah.
I've had 2 laptops stolen,
Yep.
and sometimes I've had many hard drives fail. And so one of my goals for this, I said, this is the template, the
Yeah.
permanent template in my life now. I will just always have the golden drive, which is the mother, and I will always have copies. So I got a bunch of T43, I'll just have, and so T40, so eventually, I mean, now I back up stuff every day. Eventually, they'll all be on rsync when I get to be, a big boy and learn how rsync works. So I should give a talk about rsync. So it'll be backed up. But anyway, if I lose a computer, if I lose a hard drive, it gets stolen, it's okay. I just go and get another one and take it out because everything's all backed up. And they're all the same. And it doesn't matter. I'm running DOS, I'm running Windows. But this idea of having a different machine, I've done this.
Yeah.
I have different machines with different, this doesn't work for me. I want because this space, it just goes in this little blue bag, this wonderful blue bag, wherever it is, that I got at Warpstock about 10 years ago. I still carry on. It's been around the world 20 times now. That's my go bag, crisis, revolution. I've been in places like this. You just go to the airport, I just grab it and go, And so I haven't got time to organize all the hardware.
Fair enough.
Now, that does raise some interesting licensing questions.
This is a hard discussion you and I are going to have now?
Well, I mean, let's set OS2 aside for a minute. Let's talk about Windows, right?
I have licenses for everything.
How many licenses do you have for Windows?
I have probably 10 Windows XP CDs.
Because that's essentially what you would need, because Windows, once you activate the thing, if you clone that onto another drive, it's going to tell you gotta reactivate it.
Yeah, and then you have to call them.
Yeah, you have to call them.
You gotta call
Right.
them,
That
exactly.
has never happened to me yet.
And then, if you're lucky, you
happened to
can
me.
understand every 4th or 5th word of the person at Microsoft support when you call in to activate it. And then there's a license code. We were talking about those long command lines in Linux. The license code for Windows is about, no, that's not long enough. It's probably about half. And the fellow on the other end of the line on that scratchy IP phone connection is going to be dictating to you what letters to type in for that code.
Yes.
And if you're lucky, you'll get most of them right the 3rd or 4th time through to get it activated again.
Now, I've done that on an automated phone system where it's perfectly
Yeah, but the
pronounced.
real trick is you
Wow.
just do this
No
with all
person.
your images.
So, but yeah, you gotta write it, you need a sharp pencil.
You need a sharp pencil, exactly, you gotta write it down.
Yeah, but I've done that a number of
The
times.
lesson to be learned there is exactly as you say, you have to write it down. Don't type it into the keyboard as the guy's dictating it to you.
Yeah.
Write it down first and then read it back. Say, was that brandy, whiskey, tango?
Yeah, the automated thing gave you the option to replay it also.
Yeah.
Okay, I haven't run into that yet.
Now, for Linux, of course, you generally don't have to be concerned about licensing issues, although there are commercial Linux distributions that limit that. But for OS2 variants, there are licensing concerns when you have a master copy and you're cloning as many copies for your use as you like.
Well, but
long
from
as
my
you're
point of
using one
view,
at a time,
these are,
is that okay?
except in the case something's stolen,
Not necessarily.
well, they're never more than one is going to be in use.
According to, IBM doesn't care.
Mhm.
IBM's licensing makes no distinction between a copy that you promise not to boot
Mhm.
and a copy that is bootable. So if you have two copies, one for backup and one for use, you have two licenses.
Okay, well, you're gonna make more money on me.
We will sell you as many licenses as you
Let's
want.
look at the realistic.
You wouldn't
Who's he
do
gonna
that,
spend
would
the
you?
money to?
What's that?
Actually, he really has more of a problem than he thinks. What's your fallback for your hardware when your caps start drying out?
So that's maybe a problem. I mean, I'm 73. I've got to get these things going. I estimate 95. My mom passed away at 94. And so the electrolytic caps will start to dry out. This is true. And so,
What drives that?
well, the thing is going to happen, which is going to happen to my cell phone. Okay, so this is a 2G cell phone. And they're taking down the 2G networks there.
Newfangled one. Mine's older.
So one cell phone network got shut down on me, my old bag phone. This one, now AT&T, I read, is shutting down their 2G network. T-Mobile continues. Eventually, I won't have a phone anymore. I'll just have to do without computers.
Yeah.
But at that point, my daughter will take everything.
Put it in the
for me.
cloud, just save the images in the cloud.
And then we can all access it.
Yeah.
Save it to the NSA.
Yeah. I don't like the new machines because of the keyboards. You know, these old machines have better keyboards.
This is $85, but it's the best one out there. It's,
Looks like a
it's got 32 gig.
Motorola V3. No, it's not a Motorola V3. Razer. Okay, I'm all
Are
done.
we at lunchtime?
It's lunchtime. It's
We're
lunchtime.
1 minute past. 1 minute past 12.
So I'm impressed you did all this with that DFC. That thing is hard to use, oh my God.
It is hard to use. This was an important discovery.
And I've had it clobber things a couple times.
So that didn't happen to me. It didn't damage anything,
Yeah,
but it's tough to use.
something it should not be doing.
I found the HPFS drive XT Clobber drives at random.
Really.
Yeah.
So
Okay,
on
well, I
this-
have many more discoveries ahead of me.
Yeah.
On this laptop, using ECS, I created the partitions, and I believe I installed ECS first. Then I installed Windows in a partition I had laid down with ECS, and I also laid down the 3 Linux partitions. But I realized I never have installed Linux on this. But I know I could do it because I've done it before. You just have to find a distro.
That's the key. Find the distro.
So you can
that
do
will-
this without DFC. Just be careful. And you sometimes have to go back and reactivate the, you know, what boots, for example, using ECS. You have to reboot it, install
Okay,
again.
so here's a
But
question.
you can do it.
How do you reconfigure Boot Manager?
You boot up the ECS install, and you go in and.
You have to have an operating
remove
system.
And re-add boot
Boot from CD.
manager,
Boot from the ECS
and then
CD.
it'll work, yeah.
And
Okay,
repair.
but I can
That's pretty
reconfigure
easy.
with DFC,
You can do that also, I'm just
Yeah.
saying there's another.
but I run
and
into
think
this
easier
problem
way.
of the run
It's the
check
same-
this.
It's the same thing.
Same thing.
It's the same.
Hey, is
Yeah.
some food here?
Food.
And ECS is less confusing, so.
Okay, there it
You know,
is. Time to go.
I think that Oracle has a free Linux you can get, and I believe it has that feature of asking you where you want to put the, and actually it's a very nice install.
Well, if you know about it, send me
Yeah,
some
I'll
links.
check it out and
Because
make
I'm going
sure
to work
that I'm
on this.
telling you the truth, but
Yeah.
I think that also, because the older Red Hat and CentOS all had that feature where you could say I want it here or there. But Ubuntu, very bad.
Thanks, Jeffrey.
Thanks for the opportunity to come and talk. This was a challenge. You forced me to do this. It was a good thing on my part. It took a lot of time.
I didn't even know what